How was that?
Good, nice work.
Looking
Perfect.
good.
Yeah, I can see the first slide.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
All right. Well, great. Well, look, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming. Hope you get something out of this. It's a topic that's a big part of my own falconry. Something that was really ingrained in me early. I've been hawking since about 1983, which is 40 years now, and this is really I think that the single most important skill in falconry, and on the basis of that, I wanted to make sure that everybody had an easy way to figure out how to do it, and good starting point on it. So a little bit about me. Like I say, I started in about 83. First half of my falconry career to date, I flew a little bit of everything. Second half, it's been mostly male Harris hawks and kestrels, and last couple of seasons, some Merlins. So the data that you'll see in this presentation is mostly from those three species. I've published 3 falconry books: American Kestrels and Modern Falconry, In Season, which was a journal of a season about 20 years ago, and then most recently 4 Falconry Fundamentals. The thing that I'm into now is trying to take those fundamentals, the concepts from the fundamentals book, and create training aids that, a series of what I call concept cards that will allow people to have a different way to access the information, maybe appeal to people who learn in a little different fashion, like I do. So not everybody is into books. Some people are more visual, more tactile. So the first one of these cards is the weight management card. And this is sort of a visual metaphor for what we're going to learn tonight, which is Harry McElroy's 22-hour weight management system. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Topics for this evening, just 3. Gonna have an introduction about the weight management. What is it? Where does it fit into your falconry? Why do we manage weight? Not every falconer does. There's some controversy. There always is in falconry, but I can give you tonight some good reasons why I do, and why I think you should also. So then the 3 elements of weight management, especially with regard to Harry's 22-hour system. Essentially, you're just following 3 variables, which keeps it simple. And then finally, we're going to put it to work and take a couple of examples from real birds, and we're going to go around the clock and manage the weight of a hawk from the end of hunting time to the next day's hunting time. All right. All right. So I do want to say that we've got a lot of experienced falconers on the call. A lot of this is going to be familiar to you. If it's not familiar to you, maybe this will give you a good opportunity to get your head around the idea and to learn it from scratch in a new way, in a simpler way. If weight management is familiar to you, then maybe this will give you a way to teach it a little bit more easily to your next apprentice. All right, so no talk from me about weight management goes too far without talking about Harry McElroy. So this is Harry and Beth on my last visit to Arizona. Harry is one of the grand old men of American falconry, retired from falconry now, but has given us his 70 years of hawking wisdom in a series of books all around desert hawking, various titles. Desert Hawking 2, which is really a version of his first book, is still in print and highly recommended to everyone. And right from there, even from the early days, he was outlining a weight management scheme that worked well for him, and it's become the basis of by whatever name you happen to call it, the kind of weight management that most falconers, most successful falconers that I know do. And his system has three main benefits. These are the reasons why Harry follows this system and developed it. Number one, to accurately predict the future weight of a hawk at a specific time. So, knowing what the hawk weighs now is not any harder than dropping it on the scale. Knowing what it's going to weigh 6 hours from now, 8 hours from now, 12 hours from now, or tomorrow at hunting time is really knowledge that helps you practice. Number two, it helps you maintain hunting birds within an optimal range of weight every day. So we all know we don't want to fly our birds too thin, and we don't want to fly them too fat. It's somewhere in there is the magic range. That magic range changes over the course of a season, but there is always a too low, and there is, generally speaking, always a too high. And so as you go across, your season with your bird, if you do measure it constantly and take good notes, as I do, you can, at the end of the season, chart that and see where you've been. And what you'll see is that if you have been successful on a regular basis, the weight will probably be somewhere within, from day to day, a certain predictable range. That range may go up in the coldest part of the year and go back down when it gets warmer, but from day to day, your birds are going to be in a pretty set range if you're successful. In the third benefit of the system is to be able to raise and lower a hawk's weight in small, sort of well-controlled increments. So there's no, feeding it up to, as much as it can eat when it's too low to process that amount of food. There's no, just dropping the bottom out of the weight. Everything within 1% of the body weight per day is a pretty safe sort of daily change rate, either up or down. And the fact that this system can provide all these benefits, I'm going to give you some proofs of that at the end of the presentation. All right, so first of all, what is weight management? And most simply, it's controlling a hawk's food intake to change or maintain its measured daily body mass. Okay, that's what we mean by weight management. You essentially have an input, which is how much you feed the hawk, and you've got some outputs. The hawk's own metabolism drops the weight. That can be affected by exercise and temperature and food quality, et cetera. But when you're controlling the hawk's food in order to achieve a certain weight at any given time, you're doing weight management. And you're also doing weight management if you're adjusting the food amounts, whether you measure the bird's body mass or not, and you mean to affect behavioral health. So in other words, there are folks who will tell you, look, I don't want to be a slave to the scale. I let the bird tell me, when it's ready to hunt, and this is fine. But essentially what they're doing is weight management without measurement. And if you're a very intuitive falconer, if the bird is well trained and tame, and your environment is not taxing, you have a lot of game, et cetera, then this sort of practice becomes easier. But in my view, if you're doing weight management at all, you might as well actually get some numbers and figure out where you are. So where does weight management fit into your falconry? And so in my view, and this is information from 4 Falconry Fundamentals, these are the basic concerns of everybody's falconry, no matter where they practice, no matter what type of hawk, no matter what type of falconry they do. This is the order of concern in order to be successful in falconry. It starts with your prey base, how much you have locally to hunt of whatever quarry you're after. It moves to your husbandry, essentially, how well you can maintain your hawk, keep its talons sharp, its feathers clean, what you feed it, its furniture, to training, which I call recall, basically everything that the hawk knows as a trained bird and how well it responds to you, and then slip management, which is essentially the mechanics or the physics of hunting, how close you have to be, how high the bird has to be, what do you know about the game, where it is, and what it's going to do. So within those four, categories of concern, it so happens that, just about everything else can be, fit somewhere in there. And weight management for me fits in somewhere between husbandry and recall. So husbandry starts the day you get your hands on the bird. You've pulled it out of the trap, or you've taken it out of the nest, or whatever. You're getting a weight on it pretty quick. And that's going to be your starting point of whatever scheme you have. And you're always going to be aware of that weight as long as it's required to do something for you. Weight management fits right in. After trapping to recall. Certainly, weight management and food management helps you create incentive to train a bird to do the next thing that you want it to do. Slip management requires that the bird is incented to come back to you, at least to come back to the lure, to respond to game. So it starts pretty early in the practical falconry, in my view. So fairly important and early concern, weight management. Okay, but why do we do it? All right, why do I do it? And this to me is probably the best single example of the situation that we all face, but we rarely graph it. And what you're looking at here is the entire effective weight range of a kestrel named Coco. She's caught game as low as 91 grams. That's on the left side of the scale, and as high as 108 grams on the right side of the scale. That's a very wide range of weights, effective range of weights for a kestrel. But you can see that not all those, either end of the spectrum, you're not catching that much. So you can see that on the low side, she's catching 3 at 91 grams, 2 at 94 grams, 3 on the right side, on the high side, 1 at 108 grams, 5 at 104 grams. This is a small sample, but she's caught hundreds of birds. And this graph would replicate if I had done the whole sample also. So I just haven't replicated it since then. But what you can see when you look at it is what we call a normal curve. This is what you would expect to see, kind of a clustering of the bird's most effective field performance, if you say. And that performance is going to be clustered sort of in the center there. So there's definitely, a more narrow range where she's most effective. My purpose, like your purpose, also will be to fly a hawk as fat as you possibly can. Essentially, there's no reason why anybody should fly a super thin hawk. But what you can see from this graph is a very normal presentation of what it actually looks like to fly a trained hawk. And in fact, they respond at weights that are too high for them to be catching on a regular basis. And if you compare all of your catches and all the weights at which they caught game, and you've had a successful season, it's going to look something like this. And for Coco, that effective range is between 98 grams and 101 grams. Okay, so now you're starting to see why I want to keep her in that range. And what we've got, if you look at it this way, is that so 98 to 101 is 3 grams. And 3 grams is 18% of her range, a fairly small percent of the entire range of weight. And she caught 53% of the game. So more than half of what she catches within 18% of her range. Okay, this is why we do weight management. Okay, this is why we want the bird somewhere in that range every single day. Now, this would not work if that range was unhealthy. And this would not work if the range was so fat you could never get the bird back, or it wasn't incented to hunt. So somewhere in the middle there, and this is a good example of that. This is why we wanted to have the mastery of weight management on a daily basis. Okay, so there's 3 elements and really the 3 variables that we need to talk about in weight management. It's not a million variables. This is why it's really not rocket science. You've got the target weight, which is the weight you want the bird to be at when you either train it or when you hunt with it. Essentially, it could be the target weight that you want it to be in 3 hours from now, when at your next training time. If the bird's only been in captivity for 7 days or 10 days, it's starting to hop to the fist, or it's a bird that's 10 years old, and you're going to hunt at 7 in the morning, and you want it you want it on weight. So the target weight is a thing you have to know, and this is not. Weight management is really not about picking an effective weight or guessing an effective weight from another bird. The bird always tells you what the weight is. And that weight changes over the course of a season, but from day to day, the weight changes very little. That effective range stays fairly narrow from day to day. So target weight, the fed weight, is the weight that you feed it up to after the hunt, okay? And then the third element of this calculation is the rate of weight loss. So how fast and how much per hour does it lose? All of these, when you see it this way, it seems, sort of abstract and esoteric, which is why I, have put them together into this diagram, which, this summer in honor of Indiana Jones's last ride, we'll call the Dial of Destiny. And what this image does is it combines all three of these elements. So I'll walk you through it now. The first thing you notice is that it's a circle, and the circle represents the fact that you're looking at a 24-hour day, and this should help you keep in mind that weight management is a daily practice. Okay, so there are people who maintain their birds on a 3-day schedule, or a 2-day schedule, or a 5-day schedule, or a weekend schedule. And if you graph those birds' weight, they're going to go up in the middle of the week and back down. That's not what I do. That's really not the 22-hour weight system. This graph will incorporate that. But this is really designed to show you how to keep a hawk within its range daily. And in my view and in my experience, 40 years, a healthy hunting weight is something that can be achieved every single day. So I actually don't subscribe to the idea that a bird needs to, be raised up for any number of days and then drop back down. What the 22-hour weight management system depends on is essentially a steady weight over the course of a season. And what this image does here is it shows you the time, and it shows you these three elements: the target weight, the fed weight, and the rate of weight loss. So the target weight is where the weight line intersects with with your optimal weight, essentially the weight that you'd like to reach. And we make that at hawking time. So you can see the color coding here really is just to represent the hawk's response. If it's in the red, it's unlikely to come back to you. Essentially, it's not incented, it's not hungry enough to come back to you. The closer you get to hawking time, the more incentive it feels. This is something that should be familiar to everybody who's flown a hawk. You don't want to let it loose 4 hours after you gave it its daily meal. So with the 22-hour system, you're picking a hawking time, and you want the bird's weight to correspond with that time. The fed weight is the other end of the hunt. So you've got a 2-hour hunting window there represented in green. The fed weight is the outer circle, and that's the weight at which above the interior circle that you're feeding the bird to, and that's a regular number. Okay, and there's a formula for that number, and we'll talk about that. It's essentially the average grams lost per hour times the number of hours until hunting time, which in this view is 22 hours. So target weight, fed weight, and then this represents the weight that drops over the course of the day. So one thing to note, and again, familiar to most falconers, birds are constantly losing weight. Okay, so as you are, and I am too. For us, it's a big system. We don't lose that much within 22 hours. Birds lose proportionally high amount within 22 hours. So much is measurable from hour to hour. Okay, this is a principal understanding of any kind of weight management, is that after you feed the bird, as soon as you feed it, it's dropping weight. Okay, even if it's just a little. That weight at hour 1, at hour 2, at hour 3, at hour 4. essentially you are you're tracking the bird dropping weight until they reach hunting weight again. And in this case, what you want to be able to do is feed it up enough so that it goes back around the clock and get you back to hunting weight, at the same time the next day. So how do we make this work? So I'm going to run us through the weight management over 22 hours of a kestrel. These numbers are not from my own notes, or they may be, but they're going to be very close to what you would normally see. There's 3 steps to this process. Measure the weight at intervals after each meal. Okay, so weight management requires measurement. You're gonna have to weigh the bird. You weigh the bird after the meal. You find out essentially in this diagram. Look at 6 p.m. So that's the highest weight that bird will be all day. Okay, so you're measuring the bird's weight at that time. Subtract the current weight from the previous. So if you measure it at 12 a.m. Midnight, it's going to have dropped weight over those 6 hours. Okay. And divide the number of hours between measurements. So however much it lost, you divide by the number of hours over which it lost that weight, and you have the average grams per hour lost. Okay, this is a figure that that is really crucial to the entire process. So I'm going to keep these 3 steps up on each of these slides so that we can be reminded of it. And here's here's my kestrel Coco after a hunt at 6 p.m. Fed to 111 grams. Okay, so at midnight, if I were to weigh her, she might weigh 108.6, let's say. Okay, so you've got so we've measured the weight at intervals. Those are 2 intervals. We've got 2 different weights, one of them larger than the other one. So now we subtract the current weight from the previous. So we track the midnight weight from the 6 p.m. weight, and you see that that's 2.4 grams have dropped. Okay. And then you divide by the number of hours between the measurements. And so for this 6-hour period, you've got 0.4 grams per hour lost on average. Okay, so this is already telling us some sort of actionable information that might help us predict the future as we go around the clock face. So let's keep going. So now we've got a 6 a.m. weight of 106.2 grams. Okay, so we're just going to keep going here. 108 from midnight, 108.6 minus 106.2 is 2.4 grams lost again. So again, 2.4 grams divided by 6 hours is 4 grams lost per hour. Okay, so all overnight, still got an average loss a little bit less than half a gram an hour. Okay, we're going to keep going around. Noon the next day, down to 102.8 grams. So 6 in the morning, 106.2 to noon, 102.8. That's 3.4 grams lost. You can see there's a little tick up here in the grams lost per hour, which is predictable almost universally across the board for diurnal birds of prey. At least they're going to burn less at night when they're sleeping, and they're going to burn more during the day when they're awake. Okay, so this is something you can just count on, and you're going to factor it in when you factor in a 22-hour average. So for this one, it's ticked up a little bit. Before overnight, it was 0.4, and now it's 0.56, so a little bit more than half a gram an hour. And finally, at hunting time, so 4 p.m., her hunting time, she's at 100 grams, okay, and she was at 102 at noon, 102.8. So she's lost 2.8 grams in just those 4 hours. So that's 0.7 grams per hour lost. Okay, so another uptick. All right, but you're still you have reached hunting weight. So for her, Coco, you should know she flies at 100 grams, and every night I feed her up to about 111. Okay, and this is the reason why we do this. So now we're going to average the grams lost per hour. I've got a nighttime average. We talked about that. 0.4 grams per hour nighttime. That's 111 grams. Minus 106 grams, 106.2 grams, and then what that gives you. Yeah, so daytime, keep doing it. That's 6.62, so a little bit more than half a gram an hour. And here's where where it all starts to come together now. So she lost 4.8 grams overnight, and she lost 6.2 grams in the daytime. You add those together, that's 11 grams divided by the number of hours in between the feeding and the hunting. That's 22 hours. That's 0.5 grams an hour. And 0.5 grams an hour is almost universally what an American kestrel burns at hunting weight. Okay, so this has been, sort of my experience. Dozens and dozens of kestrels burn about 0.5 gram an hour once they're at hunting weight. So this really squares with with my practice, long practice, and then dozens of other people's kestrels. And when you extrapolate that out to other species, you find that other species have a pretty normal average weight loss, and that may be affected by if you're flying in Maine or you're flying in Arizona. Whether you have to fly a little bit thinner where you live, or you can fly a little bit fatter where you are, the quality of the food, et cetera. But these birds will broadly have, sort of predictable grams per hour losses. As far as I know, nobody has collected a full list of by species and by sex and by region, what the numbers are. But I think that's going to be possible in a few years. We've got some apps now that are taking people's data, and those data can be aggregated to come up with some useful figure like that. And I'll be, like one of the first people asking for it when it happens, just because this whole business is kind of interesting to me. All right, so what we just saw on the weight management concept card, the diagram, most people would do on an Excel spreadsheet if they did it at all. So, and for years, I did all my weight management in Excel. And what you can see is that it maps exactly. This is just not the way a lot of people like to think or work. And I think the card is a lot more accessible for most people, but you'll see here that we've tracked the hours. So this is hour 0 to hour 22 in the system. We've got the time down, which is same as the wheel. Grams per hour dropped. We've already gone through that, and we figured out how we know, how much they drop at night versus how much they drop in the day. And then also within any given hour, how much they might drop is a thing that you can directly measure. Here are the weights as measured, by hour. Total grams fed in this example, it's a little bit off, 10.8, so about 11. Average grams lost per hour, 0.5. And what you can see is that on the left side of this graph is 6 p.m. after hunting, 111 grams. On the right side of the graph, lower. And also you can see sort of this break in the middle of the line of declination there that shows it speeding up. So during the daytime, starting about 5 a.m., it looks like it's starting to speed up a little bit, which also squares with experience. So that's an Excel sort of graph of exactly the same process that we just went through. All right, so a little bit of review of Harry's benefits, and now we're going to take a look at some real examples from actual birds to see if we've actually done what the 22-hour weight management system promises. We want to accurately predict a future weight at a specific time. Okay, we want to maintain hunting birds within optimal daily range. And we want to be able to raise or lower a hawk's weight in small controlled increments. Everybody following me? Can we all hear? And okay, good.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
I do. Would you prefer if questions are held until the end?
Yeah, let me get through this and we'll go back.
Okay.
We'll go back.
Thank you.
I mean, if there's a glitch or something, let me know, please. But we're almost done, actually. So we'll open it up in a second. All right. So those are the major benefits that we're trying to achieve with 22-hour weight management. So for the first one, we want to accurately predict a future weight at a specific time. In this case, if we fed up at 6 p.m. And we want to know with some certainty where a bird's going to be at 5 a.m. And we know that between 6 p.m. and 5 p.m. it's going to drop about a little bit less than 0.5 gram an hour. We can do the math And we can estimate just from this, simple formula, 111 grams minus 4.4 grams, which is, if you add up all those hours, 11 hours, times 0.4, you get 4.4. You're going to be around 106.6, so 106.5 grams, and that works out. And so the benefit of that should be obvious. There's no guesswork involved in, whether your hawk is going to be, too low in 6 hours or 8 hours or 10 hours, or whether it's going to be way too high in the same amount of time. If you're at a field meet, it becomes really important because you might miss a whole day if you've, erred either way. With this system, you really never err more than, a couple of tenths of a gram. And that kind of power of prediction is super useful, practical, power to have. Okay, so we have accurately predicted a future weight at a specific time. All right, so the second thing we want to be able to do is maintain hunting weights within an optimal daily range, or maintain weight essentially within a daily range. And what you're looking at here is the weight loss of a kestrel named Cece from her trapping, which is on the left side of the graph, to where she's starting to be trained and starting to hunt. I think this is probably to her first kill, which is usually how I do it. But you can see, the weight dropping over the first, say, 11, 12, 13 days. This is sort of the normal process by which you're, challenging the bird to learn a new thing, to hop to the fist, to eat off the glove, to fly across the room, to go outside on the creance. At a certain point, you're getting good response out of the bird. You don't necessarily want to drop it any further. And this should be true of every bird. You don't want to drop it more than is necessary to get the job done. And ideally, if possible, raise the weight as high as you can and still have the performance that you're looking for. And so what you can see here is that there was a point at which I needed to normalize that weight. And in this graph, you can see the three different colors. The blue in the center is the first morning weight. In this bird, I flew in the afternoon, so the afternoon weight is lower, which you would expect from just thinking about the wheel and the design of the diagram. The lowest weight is going to be typically when you fly, so that's PM weight, and then the fed to weight is going to be the highest weight that they'll be all day. And there was a certain point right here where I needed to keep this bird within that range, so no lower than 97. No higher than 111. And I can do that indefinitely with 22-hour weight management. Okay, so very important. And if I wanted to raise it a little bit, I could raise a little bit. I had that, I've got that control. If I want to lower it a bit, I can lower it a bit. And really by a bit, I mean, in tenths of a gram. Okay, so we have maintained, hunting weight, essentially fed weight, hunting weight, first morning weight, all of them within the range that we want to do. We've done it through 22-hour weight management. Okay, and the last thing that we want to be able to do is raise or lower a hawk's weight in small controlled increments. Okay, this is Harry McElroy writes about this. He's very emphatic about it. In the last interview he gave, he was asked, and this was post-retirement now, he's in his 90s. Of all the things that he would like a new falconer to know, what's the most important thing that he could think of in 70 years? And he said weight management and being able to control, the raising and lowering of the weight. So here's a guy that's got more experience than I may ever have, than most of us have on this call, saying that this power that we're demonstrating here, he thinks is the most important thing you can learn. His rule of thumb is 1%, so no more or less than 1% per day, and it could be less than that even as you get to where you are kind of touching some kind of margin where you might not want to exceed that margin. You can go 0.5%, but what you've got in this graph is Coco after the molt. So the molt weight is like 100% for her. So she molts at like 138 grams, which is a big chunky kestrel for her. And you've got 26 days to bring her down to 76% of that. Okay. So what this shows is from 100% to 76%, And the 100% is not trapped weight. The 100% is like 20 grams over trapped weight for this bird. So you're taking 24% off, but 24% off the fattest this bird can be. But the important thing to look at is that it was done in 26 days or less than 1% per day. So over 26 days, using 22-hour weight management, I was able to drop the weight no more than a gram a day, no more than a percentage point a day, which for kestrel ends up being around a gram. But you can do this with any hawk, okay? With any hawk of any size, of any species, they can all be managed like this. All right, so final part of the program here. If you have a pencil or a calculator and you want to follow along, we're going to have a couple of little quiz questions here. We're going to try to calculate the fed weight of a male Harris hawk. Okay, so we're going to try to find out what it weighs at 6 p.m. like on this diagram, what it weighs at 6 p.m. And the first thing that we'll need to know is what it flies at. Okay, so this bird flies best at 625 grams. Okay, so we know at 4 p.m. it was around 625 grams, and it burns 2.5 grams per hour. Okay, so this is pretty regular for this bird, season after season after season. Doesn't change much from that. So Baton Rouge, Louisiana, we're kind of warm all season. Very few, very cold days, for example, is pretty mild. Bird burns regularly about 2.5 grams an hour. So what we need to do here is look at the number of hours. Okay, so if it's 2.5 grams per hour, we're going to use this this little formula here that's on the weight chart itself. Average grams lost per hour, 2.5 times 22. Okay, and so that's 55. And we'll know now the fed weight is 680 grams. So that's the hunting weight plus the amount that it needs to carry it over to hunting time the next day. So if you look at my notes, you'll see that I fed this bird up to about 680 grams every night during the hunting season. And every day it was back down to about 625. And if we go out west, over Thanksgiving and it's super cold in the panhandle of Texas and the bird's flying all day at jackrabbits, I might raise the weight a little bit, but it's still going to burn about the same. Or if it burns a little bit faster, then I'll know this because I've been measuring it, at least every 6 hours, and I can adjust my calculations. But I'm going to know the fed weight of this bird every night. There's never going to be a time when I just let it crop up, or a time when during any time of day I don't know approximately how much that bird weighs. Okay, so we'll do a female Merlin now. All right. And we know this Merlin flies at 180 grams. And what we're going to try to do is figure out how many grams does it lose on average per hour. Okay. So we know the fed weight is 202, and this is, sort of a hypothetical. It would be impossible for you to know these things and also not know the grams lost per hour. But what you do here, if you know the fed weight at 6 p.m. and you know the flight weight at 180 grams, you're gonna subtract 180 from 202, which is 22, and then we're going to divide that by the number of hours until hunting time, and we're going to find out that it's about a gram an hour. Okay, so and this is like kestrels at 0.5 gram an hour. Merlins are almost universal at about a gram an hour. So you end up feeding the Merlin, 22 to 24 grams of food a day, typically. All right, so that is the end of the presentation. I want to call your attention to this QR code here on the left, the green one. This is a discount on scales, which makes sense for the nature of our presentation tonight. At Western Sporting, all the scales, if you hit that code with your phone right now, it'll take you to a special page where the discounts are already sewn into the page. Okay, and he says this is good through Friday. I've asked him to extend it longer than that, but I don't know that he will. But a 10% discount on a $750 scale is a pretty good discount. So, and obviously, it's worth getting at a discount at any price. But there's that up in the top corner he's also selling these weight cards of mine. Plus you can add 4 falconry fundamentals to that if you don't have it and would like to have it. And that is the end of the PowerPoint presentation. So do we want to go through the whole thing again? Do we want to ask questions? What do we want to do? I'm going to, I guess, keep screen sharing.
Well, I got a question.
I have
All right,
questions,
Justin.
and there was also some in the chat if you
Oh,
want
no.
to refer to those at some point.
Okay. Yeah,
You and
if everybody has this code, and you've got the code in the chat in that PDF. So I'll go ahead and get off here so I can look at the chat. All right, Justin, go first, and then I'll start looking through the chat.
All right, so you and I, we've talked about weight management a little bit when we were at NAFA. And you had stated that the temperatures weren't really a big thing when it came to that whole 22-hour. And I don't want to be a naysayer on that, but living up here in the Great Lakes area, when you hit like 40 degrees seems to be different than 20 degrees, seems to be different than 0 degrees.
So you're asking,
do I have to have a set, like a 22 hours at 40 degrees written down and 22 hours at 20, like at different temperatures? Or
so let me say, I live in a mild climate, and I fly birds, a lot of birds that we keep indoors where the climate is obviously controlled 100%. But even the outdoor birds, don't have extremes, certainly not extreme cold. But when I am hawking in extreme cold, I do make the adjustment. So to answer your question, I would have in my mind those breakpoints. And if those are going to be predictable breakpoints by temperature, and the thing that's breaking is your estimation of the grams lost per hour, right? And you're trying to reduce the number of variables that you have to deal with. Obviously, the outside temperature, you can deal with it somewhat by insulating the bird, trying to maintain an interior temperature of your mew. If you're way up north and it's super cold, you're going to have to do that. I would say there's some benefit in doing it regardless, just to keep it within a range so that you can be familiar by weighing the bird and by taking good notes what those breakpoints are, to where, look, below 40 degrees to 10 degrees, you're going to burn an extra 3 grams on this bird a day, or an hour rather, or 2 grams an hour. And this is something that you can look back at your notes at and see if you think it's predictable. If it's not predictable, then so in my view, if it's not predictable, you're not taking close enough notes. I mean, if you are surprised when you walk out in the morning what your bird weighs, like there should really be no surprise in my view. Okay. Obviously, I don't live in a super cold environment. I'm trying to think about leaving a hawk out and being surprised. I would be uncomfortable with any scenario where I went out in the morning and did not know what my hawk weighed within an acceptable range. My guess is that that. My guess is that you would not. That you would also be surprised to have a different weight than you expected by a wide margin. Whatever you have to do to prevent that surprise is what I'm suggesting you're doing. And I could look at like your daily notes. We could come up with a program of weighing, which would give us an idea based on temperature whether you actually are seeing an uptick in the grams lost per hour. This is an achievable program, I think. So I mean, to your major point, when I said it doesn't matter, it matters less to me where I am than it probably does to you where you are. But it's always, my view would be that it's always under control. It's always a thing that you can manage. All right, I don't know if that helps you, but I would like to let's talk again later about that. I would like to try to look at those numbers and see if we can figure something out. Again, to talk about the apps, there's the Falconry Journal app, which automatically measures temperature every time you measure the weight. It takes your local ambient temperature and puts it into the app as a field in an Excel database that you can download at any time. It does wind speed. It does all kind of the full meteorological package on every note that you take. It's called the Falconry Journal app, and I use it. I recommend it. You can use it to share data automatically with your sponsor, with your apprentice. So you can keep track of their birds without asking them. It's super useful. And at any given time, if we wanted to have a discussion about it, you could just send me your entire data set. And I can run my own graphs and see, and then maybe I can look at it and say, oh yeah, there's a break point. So every time below 40, you need to be feeding, an extra gram an hour, et cetera, something like that. Okay.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
2 questions. I'll give you the softball first.
All right.
You talked about there in the 22-hour management system, and you're referring to, let's say, nighttime versus daytime burn rates. And let's say if someone's actually hunting in the morning and they just do that, and that's their pattern. Do you expect it still to have a nighttime, daytime relationship in burn rate, or is it more metabolism of the bird as they, put the crop over digestion and then cast through?
Well, so what you find is birds burn more weight per hour in the immediate few hours after feeding. Okay, so that burn rate, if you were to measure it, it kind of skyrockets in the first few hours, because they basically got a big bolus of food in their crop and they're burning through it. Like their metabolism kicks up, they start burning weight, they start pooping, they're burning weight faster at that time than they do later. If that time is in the morning because you flew it at 7 a.m. and you're back by 9 and you want to give it its daily ration at 9. It's going to have not only the daytime factor, whatever that is, which raises it's just mental activity, physical activity, just the fact that it's awake. It's going to be burning more grams. Also, the fact that you fed it, that it has its largest meal during the day, that grams per hour is going to be higher in that first quarter of the day. But at night, it's going to drop. And in that case, at night, it's going to drop probably significantly. And if you let your bird sleep in a box, where it's insulated, it drops even more. So you can really see, directly how your management, your husbandry affects the grams lost per hour. If the bird is, got a quiet place to sleep and it's comfortable there and it fluffs out, it goes to sleep early and, tucks its head behind its wing, that weight per hour drops significantly compared to one that is awake all night and looking around and and disturbed. This becomes sort of a useful tool if your bird has you're worried about sauerkraut. Let's say you fed it up too much, you want to keep it awake, right? Because you want to keep those grams burning. Like the thing that that sort of counter indicated at that time is to let it go to sleep. Now you want to, like, I turn the lights on and I put the bird on in the living room and try to keep it awake, because you want to use what you know about the bird's metabolism and how it affects the grams lost per hour. So yes, I would say that. Is that the softball question or is that the hard one?
That was a softball question.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, the second one is a real interesting plot you had is with Coco. Weight across the range, and then her kills or taken. So to me, that almost begs the question as for a third axis. Did you fly Coco at the same frequency? 10 flights at the low weight, 10 flights middle weight, 10 flights at the high weight. Because if the majority of your flights were in, let's say, the sweet spot, that's when you're going to be catching the majority of the game. So it almost begs the question as to, would it not be like success rate when you're dividing by the number of occurrences that
right. No, I get where you're going with that. First answer to that question is, I am in the business of hunting, and I do want to catch game. And I do want to catch game, at least one head of game on every hunt if possible. Obviously, it's not always possible, but that's my goal. So given that the bird, that I also have a competing interest in wanting to fly the bird as heavy as I can. So this is a thing I do test on a daily basis, and we all test this, whether informally or formally, when we, when we take the bird out when it's a couple of grams heavy anyway, right? And we measure it so we know the success rate on those days that we've done it. That graph does not show how many days the bird was flown at 108 grams, for example. But I can tell you that I am biased toward catching game. Okay, so that graph is going to be biased toward wherever I catch the most game, and where I catch the most game is biased toward where the bird is most responsive to the game that I show it. So what I know are my standard variables are how many slips I can give them a day, how many slips I see a day, how long I spend during a hunt, and my goal never changes of wanting to catch at least one. Okay, so those things are constant throughout the entire hunting season, and what that constancy brings you is that it only works out within a certain range of weights. So if you in other words, you look at it backwards, you look at what days did he catch, what time did he catch, and what was the weight, and then you do the graph, and the graph looks like that. And it's not that it's not for lack of making a mistake, or it's not for lack of wanting to raise the weight. It just so happens that over the course of a season, you see a normal curve, and you should see a normal curve in that.
Hey, Matt.
Yes.
Yeah, just a follow up on that comment. I kind of had that, because I think about a lot of this from a research perspective.
Yes.
So I kind of had that question too, is, how equitable were those different weights being flown? And I think another way of looking at it, if you were interested in it, is it's not so much how many days you were out flying at those weights, but what was the success rate on the number of slips at any given weight. And so, if you were flying at 91 grams and you had 10 slips and one hit, that's a 10%. If you're flying at 105 grams and you have 10 slips and, total 10 slips and 8 hits, that's an 80% success rate. So just kind of another way of thinking about how that could be looked at, because I think it really is an interesting.
No, I think that's great. The reason why I don't do that is because it's inconvenient. I mean, you've been out hawking with me, Clinton.
I understand it. I understand it completely. I really do.
And so I think, so I'm just guessing here, but I think if we were to do this, if I had a grad student that was riding along with me with a clicker, and we were counting slips and catches over the course of a season or 2 seasons or 3 seasons, I'd say the normal curve would look exactly the same way, but you'd have this extra layer of supportive data that would say they were also more successful, or the hunt ended quicker. If I'm just going for one, it's going to end faster. There might be some really interesting stuff that I don't look at just because.
And that's a really good point. If you have, your number of slips are lower just because you're having such a higher hunting success. And so,
all that stuff is relevant.
About how to use these trained birds from kind of a research perspective. So it's asking the question a bit differently. And so, we're all doing what we do, and it's fun. I think that they're interesting questions. So I think it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, we'll talk about it over Thanksgiving, Clint.
I'm a behavior analyst, so I'm enjoying the talk about graphs, but I do have a couple clarifying questions as an egregiously new individual to this field and not having a lot of background knowledge. I wanted to clarify, you had mentioned that the bird will tell you what the ideal weight is, but I don't want to assume, but I'm wondering, is there sort of a baseline expectation for maybe a healthy weight when you first get a bird, so that you can at least be functioning from some informed position, so you don't inadvertently cause harm by overfeeding, underfeeding?
Yeah.
Okay. There is one already?
Well, so it's kind of a gestalt impression that you have. So let's say you're talking about a passage bird, a bird that you're trapping.
Right. If I'm new and I have my first bird, is there an average range I should aim for, and then I can fine tune based on the bird?
No, because for example, a red tail, they're all over the map. They're 600 grams to 1800 grams. Okay. So there is no magic number. There's no way to guess a number. There's this gestalt impression of whether it's healthy or not. You can feel the keel. You can feel, how thick the legs are. You can look at the feather condition, look for, external parasites. You can look for color of the skin. Healthy birds usually, bright yellow, good eyes, good clear eyes. Essentially, a healthy bird could be at its maximum weight and be very much smaller than the same sex of the bird that you catch two poles down, could be, 200 grams heavier, and actually be thin. That bird might be unhealthy.
So you truly are exclusively looking at the output of the bird at X weight to like assess where that healthy point is for
yes.
that animal.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that changes the better you know the bird. So
Yes.
so that's why I measure. That's why day starts with day 0. Okay.
Okay.
And why it's very important to know where you are at day 24 and at day 34 and at day 7.
Okay.
Because your starting point is arbitrary. You may have a thin hawk, you may have a fat hawk, you may have a resistant hawk that is, for whatever reason, just not, like getting with the program. Or you may have a bird that for whatever reason just figures it out and says, hey, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm gonna start jumping to the fist tonight.
Right.
But where the bird tells you what the weight is the fact that it did the thing that you wanted it to do and you weighed it. Okay, so now now you're starting to make an association, and a day 1 or day 2 or day 3, these are pretty broad associations. You don't want to put a lot of stock in them. Day 7, day 10, day 15, day 25, you're starting to see a lot more association between the weight and the behavior that you want. So by 2 weeks, essentially, the bird is usually most birds are flying at least a few feet to you. Across a room, they're eating pretty much a predictable amount of food to where they won't fly to you. You record that weight. Usually for example, with a kestrel, it might be 3 grams over their response weight. They stop responding. So you put that in your notes. All the hawks will have something like that, but this is a day by day practice. And when you get to 4 weeks and you're in the field with the bird, you will already be, and you remember that one graph that showed the reduction in the weight from trapping and then sort of normalizing after about 2 weeks, your graph will start to look like that. And that's because you won't need to take it any lower. You're getting great response out of the bird. You may even start to raise it a little bit at that point because it starts to build muscle. So,
you're literally just probing for where are we hitting maybe an unhealthy, we're not responding at the rate we want because we're not fed enough, where are we satiated, and how do I ride in the middle? That's literally all you're doing.
Yes, and you won't know that for a couple of weeks. So
that makes more sense.
You play it safe. If you think you got a thin bird, if your sponsor says, oh yeah, that bird's starving to death, you basically treat it like a rehab bird until it's healthy. And if it's super fat, maybe you don't feed it for a day or 2. I mean, before you even start. So,
gotcha.
So this is where the art and the experience really comes in.
Yeah, I wondered how much there was relying on the individual. I had 2 other quick qualifiers, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah.
When you're putting the bird on the scale with a regular basis, especially towards the beginning, I assume you are rewarding them with food after
Hold on
they're
one
weighed.
second. I got stop somebody from singing.
You're fine.
Shared workspace. All right.
That's reasonable. I assume you're using food to reinforce like getting on and off the scale, especially at the beginning. Is that accounted for within the 22-hour system?
Yes. So so essentially every gram you give the bird, every time you feed the bird, ideally you would be measuring that. Okay. Actually putting a bird on a scale is not really a food intensive procedure. If you're hooding the bird, there's no food involved at all. You just back it onto the scale.
But so that's
but almost, all birds almost immediately, either learn to back on the scale themselves and trained birds typically you take them off their perch or they fly to the scale because they know what's coming next. So there's really, that's just sort of a trained behavior that they do. They don't need any incentive for that.
And then last clarification, is the weight lost like a 1-to-1 with food given? Like if you want them to have
Yes.
3 ounces to lose, it's exactly 3 ounces you feed them.
Yeah. So within boundaries, so you get out of the realm of predictability if you like really crop the bird up. Okay, which I don't recommend, just generally speaking, and that's really a totally different discussion about sort of husbandry and management over the course of a season. The notion that you would just pack a bird full at some point with as much food as it could eat. Okay, that's going to throw you off. But yeah, if you want to raise the bird by, a kestrel, say example, you fly it at 100 grams, you want to fly it at 105 tomorrow, you can do that by giving it half a gram on the front end. Now, if it had over those 22 hours, if it's a little bit ill, or if it had more activity, you may have to do more than half a gram of extra feeding, but you will know that by measuring it along the way. With a larger hawk, where the sort of margins of error are wider, and it has more inertia, essentially more, it's just more mass, so it doesn't lose weight unpredictably in any way. It can be very precise, and you can, if you want it 5 grams heavier tomorrow, you feed it 5 grams heavier, 5 grams more to the fed weight. Yeah, I would say that's if you've got the bird dialed in, that's a 1-to-1.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah. So am I looking, so for questions in the chat?
I have one if you didn't have one queued up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So do you notice, like, regarding that 1-to-1, do you notice variance in like the nutritional density of what you're feeding? So, the difference in metabolizing quail versus a mouse per se?
Yeah, so that is a factor that I try to minimize by feeding, the highest quality food I can feed, variety of food, so that I can kind of get a sense of it. But a gross comparison would be like, chicken versus duck. There you can really see, the grams per hour really drop on the richer food, and it needs less of it. But for me, and this is a little bit more artistic than scientific. Once a bird is burning at a regular rate that I know for a fact is healthy for it, because it hunts every day and catches stuff every day and has good stamina and stays healthy, that rate of weight loss becomes a measure to me of the bird's health. And if that slows down significantly at some point, I think there's something wrong. Okay. If it speeds up significantly, there's something wrong. So one of the first signs you see in a sick kestrel, for example, if it has something like coccidiosis, where it's asymptomatic for, a couple of days even, that rate of weight loss will kick up. And it'll where you expected it to be 0.4, it's 0.6. And where you expected it to be 0.6, it's 0.8 grams, per hour lost. And when if somebody tells me their kestrel's sick, I ask them, about the weight, and if they've noticed any, uptick. And generally speaking, somebody who's successful with the small hawk will have those figures for you. They'll know the grams per hour lost expected to be overnight, or expected to be between 1 hour and the next hour. And they will have noticed this. But if you don't do this, you won't notice it. So this is another good reason to, to sort of keep track of this grams per hour weight loss rate.
Hey, Matt, I've got another question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, the way I learned when I first started doing this, and I've kind of continued to do it because it's proven effective for me, is the first, 4, 5, 6 kills a Harrisis or a red tail gets, I usually let them feed up pretty well on that kill. I was taught, and I think it's really worked for me, it really reduces their tendency to start trying to carry and everything. Do you think that, how would you suggest going about that, as just don't do it, or what, to try to, I'm thinking that maybe it's okay to do that and then kind of shift back to this weight management regime.
Well, yeah. So there's no wrong way, I would say, Clint. But you will lose the amount of control that you give up by doing that. And in my view, my experience, you won't gain significant benefit in the bird's behavior, or what. Like, there may be some birds that are going to carry, and the only way that you find for it not to carry is to let it eat everything that it's caught on the ground, for example. And to me, that'd be a pretty poor place to be in with a hawk, because it gives you zero control over basically anything that's important to you. And you risk, having the bird, eat too much in a sitting. or bolt after it eats and not be able to pick it up. So I always err on the side of the most amount of control that I can have. You can always feed it more later. Like that, I don't think that they sort of mentally benefit from packing their crop versus eating to where they're at non-response weight, which is what I call. So non-response is really just a couple percentage points over their best response weight. They feel good at that point. Is my feeling. They start thinking about carrying, then they start thinking about being able to walk off a kill. They start, that's really the point at which you can go ahead and stop the feeding. And so what I recommend is that even on the first kill, you get in there really quick. You get them a couple of bites. You get them, up a percentage point over their hunting weight, whatever. Pick them up, transfer them off, take them back home, put them on the scale, see how much more they need to eat. And that way you sort of maintain the 22-hour system indefinitely. And if you want to feed it up, you certainly can, but I don't think there's that much benefit to be had. Again, that's
Sounds good. It's just when I started out, that's kind of how I was instructed, and I've never had a problem with the bird carrying, so I assumed it was working.
Yeah, right. Well, it may work, but it probably will work the other way also, Clint.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
Matt, I got a question too, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
The one I was going to ask was actually just also mentioned by somebody else in the chat, so this should cover it as well. But the whole 22-hour system seems very focused on daily hunting, but if that's not going to be an option, if there's going to have to be a day or a couple of days in between, what's your suggestion for those in between days? Do you still think you get the most control by still going through the cycle, getting it up to the target weight every day, even if you're not going to hunt? Or like, how do you manage that in between period?
Yeah. So what you find, so first of all, I do it even when I'm not hunting. But what you find if you're not hunting for several days in a row, the grams per hour rate drops a little bit because the bird's just inactive. So if you become so familiar with the grams per hour loss of your bird on a regular hunting schedule, you will see that rate drop some when you stop hunting for 4 or 5 days in a row. And I think that just reflects the fact that the bird is not as active as it was. There's no harm in raising the weight a little bit, for example, on those off days. But for me personally, I don't consider hunting weight to be an unhealthy weight for the bird to be at every day. If you're not going to hunt and you can afford to have it a percentage point or two above its hunting weight for a couple of days, you still do exactly the same way. You just add that on the front end. And so where I would keep my bird I got now that hunts at 100 grams. If I'm hunting her every day, she's going to be at 100 grams at 4 o'clock every single day. If I know I'm not going to fly her for a week or so, I might raise her to 101 or 102, but I'll have her at 102 every day. Instead of hunting, I'll just do jump ups. So depending on the species that you have, that may not be a practical choice for you, but for a small falcon, you can do jump ups, which keeps the rate of, the burn pretty much the same as hunting, maybe even more so because for a kestrel, if you do 100 jump ups with it, it's probably working more than it will, to fly 15 feet to catch a starling. I try to do it on the off days. I do not, feed the bird up and keep it as fat as possible and then have to then drop the bird's weight again. There's just no benefit to it. And I think there's quite a bit to lose, at least in terms of, practical falconry.
Just in follow up to that, do you believe, or have you seen in your experience that there's any, can you kind of contribute to the reliability or the consistency of the weight by staying on top of that every day, like getting them up to the target weight every day? Does that create trends with their metabolism? Or
I think living things find homeostasis. I think you see if you measure something like weight in a bird multiple times a day, every day for weeks and weeks and weeks, you will start to get a sense of how environmental factors affect that bird and how the bird sort of fights back. I like to think so. They want to be at a certain, normal state, hunting weight per day, as long as it gets the fed weight, that's the right fed weight, is a healthy state for them. And they will want to maintain that. If they get less food, their grams per hour will drop to try to get themselves back to, their normal hunting weight at 4 p.m. Internally they can only do that for a couple of days before it becomes more than they can handle. But we all do this. I mean, living creatures try to maintain steady state. And like I say, on a small animal like a hawk that you're measuring very closely, multiple times a day, you can really see that effect. So I always want to err on the side of doing exactly the same thing with the bird every day at the same time. The food should be the same high quality all the time, the same amounts. You give it a normal schedule, it will respond to the schedule by behaving normally and being predictable. I think around the clock, it'll behave normal, it'll burn normal, I think, answer your question. Definitely recommend that.
Matt,
Yes. Alan.
I like it. It's the simplicity of it. It's a great animal welfare tool, because I think one of the things that we find in falconry and a lot of other animals is that if you can take that equation out and you already can predict what the weight is going to be, you then put your bird in a really safe zone, because too many people try to guess, oh, they need to be lower, oh, they need to be higher, this takes the guesswork out of it. I think that the other factors that I'm hearing that are brought up are the things that once you've mastered the skill of just the repetition of basic weight management, that you can go outside the boundaries and learn more about your bird, more about the weather, more about the game, more about what you feed, because then you start to experiment.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, if you have one base within which to work with and it becomes a normal skill, this tool really helps to answer a lot of questions that a falconer may have, especially a new falconer. And it allows them an opportunity to spend, instead of time going, oh my gosh, my bird is too heavy, what am I going to do? Well, you're going to take the guesswork out of it, and you're going to spend more time with slip management.
Yes.
And finding out more opportunities you have to do with the species. So
right.
I'm applauding you, Mr. Matt. You've taken a small little piece, put it on a little dial, and you're making falconry safer for the birds we work with. Congratulations.
Thank you, Alan. Your check is in the mail.
Hey, Matt.
So, I was going to say that when this is off your plate, when this is demystified, and this is a very important part of your, falconry practice, but when this is demystified, you can concentrate on hunting game. You can concentrate on finding the good spots, on making sure that you got the right prey base, on learning slip management, all the things that really contribute to, success in the field. And this obviously is a huge part of that success, but it should not have to be the thing that, that you panic over.
Man, I just wanted to throw out an offer real quick. I had a few Kentucky Falconers message me that couldn't get on. I have an enterprise Zoom account. If you'd like to do this again, you're welcome to use it. It can host you to 300 or 500 people.
I'd be happy to do that for sure. But also I'm going to post this to YouTube. It's still recording now, so I think I can probably get the whole thing on YouTube. And if there's demand, if people still want to go through this again and do it, I'm really happy to do it anytime.
I'll shoot you a message on Facebook for my contact information, and if you would like to do that, just let me know.
Okay. I would also say that if anybody has they represent their club and they think this might be a good talk for an apprentice workshop or some kind of picnic thing, or middle of the season or whatever, if you want to just sit down and talk about weight management, I'd be delighted to hop on another Zoom call and go through it with your members. So keep that in mind. Let me say that I want to address David. Sarah asks, how does the temperature affect this range? I think we talked about that a little bit. I think it does. I'm a little cavalier about that because I don't have to worry about it here. But I do think that it should not make it impossible to manage. And if it does, we're probably doing something wrong. David has a lengthy question about his goshawk. And I would say that if David will shoot me an IM, then we'll talk about that. It's more than I can read right here, but it looks like a good question. Happy to look at that. Brianna says, does this work best for birds housed indoors since the grams lost per hour is more consistent? Yeah, every time you can reduce the variability by external factors and you have control over that, you should do that. Because it's so important to be able to hit target weight every day and to have power over, over that number, whether it needs to be a little bit higher, whether it needs to be a little bit lower. You want to be able to have predictive power over that, and you want to have effective power over that. You want to be able to create, the weight that you want at the future time. So I would say, in my experience, it definitely works best indoors, and I attribute that to the fact that your temperature and and also the birds. Potential for being, in alert, aggravated, annoyed, all of that kind of normalizes indoors just because you've reduced the number of variables of things that can happen to them. So all of that, I think, folds into their average grams lost per hour rate. And to the extent that you want that to be a normal number that then you need to reduce variables. That said, this works with birds outside too. And so it does not let anybody off the hook. You shouldn't think, well, it's going to be impossible for me because my bird's in the weathering yard all day. That is not the case. It works just as well out there. You just may have to, adjust how often you measure. Alan says, calibrating the hourly weight loss involves digestion crop as well as ambient temperature. Once calibrated, should work for, he's making a comment here. Okay, more comments. Do you have any references, RVD, do you have any references from classical literature that talk about weight management? That's great. That's a great question. I've poured through my own library just as somebody who's interested in this idea of how people used to do it before there were scales. And one of the, sort of typical pushbacks you get from, if I post a weight graph on Facebook and, obviously it's a meaningful bit of, a data presentation for me. Some people will respond immediately that look, well, yes, so it's important to you, but how did Emperor Frederick do it when, he wasn't weighing the birds? And the answer is, I don't know. They have people there that are watching the birds all the time. They kept good track of their birds. They could also lose birds a lot. They had unlimited supply of birds. They had probably had more game, more access to game. Of course, Frederick had unlimited access to everything he wanted. So I have a choice now not to use a scale, but I do not make that choice because this works better. Okay, for me, this absolutely works better, and all the best falconers that I know have some relation to weight management. They maybe they don't do it exactly the way I do it or talk about it the way I talk about it. They do some version of 22-hour weight management.
Just to elaborate on that, I'm sorry, because that comment drives me bananas. Back then, that was somebody's full-time job, was to watch a bird's behavior. For most of us, it's not our jobs. It's something that, it's a lifestyle that we choose to do in addition to, what pays the mortgage. So we're not all kings, and that sucks, but we have scales now, so we can still participate.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't let us off the hook. I mean, I am sympathetic to the idea that, well, you can't be a slave to the scale. The scale does not tell you, if you don't look at your bird, but you only look at the weight. For example, let's say you set up an electronic scale on your bird in a mew and you never looked at it. You only looked at the weight and had an automatic food chute. You would lose important data. okay, you would have a pretty good idea, but you would definitely not have the relationship with your bird that you would through regular, management, which is another reason why, daily hunting or daily interaction is so important. Because you do internalize all those little cues. You do see how much it poops. You do see how it looks at you. You see what it, whether it turns to you quickly or it doesn't turn to you quickly. All of those things add up to, oh yeah. And the person who asked about, how do you know the number, Brittany? Those things are what help you understand what the number is for that day, for that week, for that period of training, for that month. All those things add up. For me, once you're hunting, basically it's when you're catching. If the bird, has good hunt and it's good stamina and it caught game, and it had, more in the tank when you were done catching game, that's the number, whatever that range is, it's going to be good. RVD asks, how do you know a bird is gaining fat in addition to muscle? So lots of different ways to measure this. Just with a kestrel, which is what I've got now, I say jump ups. Okay, so I'm aware of the sort of truism that muscle weighs more than fat. I'm not sure exactly how to operationalize that in terms of my falconry, but I can tell you that you can measure jump ups, because when you start doing jump ups, they do fewer of them than when you're really doing jump ups later. So this is a thing that you can actually measure, and maybe they'll only do 10 before they get worn out. After 10 days or 15 days of this, they'll do 100 in a sitting for their 11 grams. And so, I guess the one time that had a gross example of this was I had one kestrel, killed another of my kestrels at a field meet once. I had perched them close together. This is a team of birds that hunted together all the time. I went to register. I came back 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, and she caught him and eaten him. Anyway, terrible story, awful, especially because I was given a talk at that meet about how to keep kestrels. So if you ever need a humbling, scenario, think about that one. Anyway, I took the opportunity to open up the bird that had died. This was a bird that was at hunting weight or within range. Obviously, at that time at night, it was not at hunting weight. It was at whatever the weight was during the 22-hour cycle, right? But the bird was maintained on a daily hunting schedule. And I was curious. This one opportunity I had to actually look inside of a bird that I knew to be at hunting weight, what I thought to be a healthy hunting weight, and a bird that responded well. Like the recall was excellent. It would come 100 yards as soon as you called it. It would chase every starling. It caught starlings every day. Multiple starlings. It was a good weight, and opened it up. It had fat down all the seams of its muscles. It had a round keel. This was a kestrel. Now kestrels, we tend to think we fly them pretty thin relative to, say, a merlin, which they fly pretty round. This was a kestrel that hunted every single day, caught game every day, had a round chest and fat, like seams of yellow fat down the tip. So that in the most awful, terrible way, was the best lesson I have had in terms of, an obvious example of a bird, that I say is at hunting weight. And when I tell you that hunting weight should not be unhealthy, this is what I think about. It won't start out that way. Your bird, when it catches its first head of game, it's been in captivity 3.5 weeks, your red tail. If it dies and you open it up, it's going to look different. But by mid-season, and then you're hunting it, 4 times a week, and it's getting, good air time, and it's catching lots of stuff, that bird's muscling up. And my guess is that if it has enough stamina and speed and aggression to hunt regularly and successfully, it's a healthy bird.
In that story about your kestrel, and you were saying
Yes.
it had the fat seams, were you saying that even though you felt that it was healthy because of what you were seeing, when you actually looked inside, you were surprised by the amount of fat because that was equating it to being unhealthy?
Yeah, I thought it should.
Okay.
I just imagined that on the inside of a kestrel at hunting weight, that was flown regularly, you would be super lean, and you wouldn't see any like fat, and you wouldn't see any yellow fat, is what I anticipated, and I saw a bunch.
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
So like, compared that bird to at its molt weight, which would probably be 25 grams heavier, probably a lot more fat then. So I really, obviously I'm not I don't crack open kestrels all the time. I'm sure if I did, I would be able to tell, the difference between one that was at molt weight and one that was at hunting weight. But I was like, to the extent that I had that opportunity, I was really surprised that it had any, extra, extra weight on it at all.
Matt,
Yes.
with regards to what you're saying, maybe that is what birds should be like. And perhaps since we don't have the opportunity to dissect normal birds, we don't know what a normal bird really should look like, how much fat it should have.
Well, I would say that probably among veterinarians and wildlife rehabilitators, there's probably a body of data and photographic evidence. There may be even whole books about it, for all I know, that compare birds by species, birds by time of year. It seems to me like a thing, and Clint may chime in. It seems to me like a thing that probably a bunch of people have studied. So this is an opportunity for us as falconers to expand on our, terrible anecdotes that we have. Each of us have these, a couple of these terrible stories. Well, if you're a rehabber or you're a wildlife biologist, you've got a, huge data set that you could look at, and we don't typically avail ourselves of that, but we probably should. That's why it's really important to have Clint here and people like Brian Millsap and other people who are, qualified wildlife biologists and anatomists and veterinarians in the sport, because they can really give us the benefit of that. So for myself, I never want to crack open another one of my hawks again, but I was glad I did in this case.
Matt, really quick, can I just ask, do you have a time limit for where you hope to be wrapped up tonight? I just ask because I know a lot of us probably would love to keep picking your brain, but we don't want to keep you on here all night.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that, Joel. I see it's 8:30. We've been on for an hour and a half. I'm good to go for another 15 minutes if anybody wants to stay on, or we can wrap it up. I just want to get through the end of these questions here in the chat. Kate asks, curious as to why 22 hours versus 24 hours to calculate. I was trained using a 24-hour scale. So that's an excellent question. So Harry McElroy, as far as I can tell, was sort of as the progenitor of the 22-hour idea, and his explanation of it makes a lot of sense to me. It's essentially that as a practical matter, we give ourselves, and he gives himself, he's sort of, estimating based on his own, life experience, about a 2-hour window to hunt, which may mean half an hour drive out, half an hour drive back, an hour in the field. This seems to me, in my experience, about right. If it's not a field meet, if it's, 2 hours is pretty good. Now, it's obvious to me that even in the way that I think about this, if instead of 2 green, hours on the diagram, there were 1, we would still understand how this works. All right. So the reason why it can't be 24 hours, because you don't hunt for a minute, right? Like, it's not like you have the bird at hunting weight and then you feed it up after you've caught it in 2 seconds. That would be a 24-hour weight management system. A 23-hour weight management system makes sense for me as so lately I've been flying my kestrel out the window. I can do that within, a mile of my house and catch a starling in 8 minutes from when I left. I could feed it up then. And probably as a practical matter, I do generally come back within an hour and feed it up. And what I do in that case is feed an extra gram, that's just what I do. I haven't internalized it. But if you're flying a larger hawk, if you're, if you're having to drive to the field, if you're having to, get your gear together and then deconstruct your gear afterwards, load the dogs, unload the dogs, 2 hours is, in my experience, pretty practical framework. Again, it's not an exact science. It's a framework and a way of thinking about weight management as, a thing that you do on a daily basis that incorporates the time that you hunt. And sort of honors or at least acknowledges the fact that you want the bird at a certain weight at a certain time, and that you're going to feed the bird up at a certain time after that. and that it's probably best practice to do that the same way all the time. And those things, to the extent that those are true, I believe in all those. So that's why the 2 hour wait. That's why the 2 hour hunting window and the 22 hour, weight loss scheme.
Can I ask another question, Matt?
Sure.
Sorry, I'm going to keep pelting you here as long as you let me.
That's good.
So I know it's kind of a controversial topic, the whole question of apprentices choosing to fly kestrels versus a red tail.
Oh,
And
thank you.
You and I have discussed this before, but I'd still like to hear what you have to say. When it comes to weight management, obviously that's the big problem with kestrels. In your opinion, do you think that doing the weight management with a larger bird does prepare you for learning it with a smaller bird, or is it really kind of a whole different skill that you kind of just have to learn from the beginning? And just going along with that, what is your position on apprentices flying a kestrel as their first bird?
Well, I think those are two different questions.
Thank you.
The first part of that question is it a totally different thing depending on the species? And my answer to that is no, it's not a totally different thing. It gets to be different on a bird like maybe a sharp-shinned hawk, which might cycle, twice a day. It may get more complicated with certain species. The difference between a kestrel and a red tail is really just a red tail is 10 times the size of a kestrel. Everything else is the same. I mean, kestrels uniquely for small hawks are probably the easiest small hawks to fly in falconry. They're the most like a red tail. They're the most reliable in weight management, the easiest to manage on a 22-hour schedule of all the small hawks.
I'm surprised to hear you say that. That's a powerful statement.
Well, it's my experience, and I've got some experience in that realm, and there's really no reason across the board to assume that a kestrel is an order of magnitude more difficult than a red tail on the basis of weight management. Okay, but that's as far as it goes. So there's husbandry concerns that are probably an order of magnitude more difficult with a kestrel than versus a red tail. Not unmanageable by any means. If you have a sponsor who flies kestrels or merlins or sharp-shinned hawks or Cooper's hawks, is accustomed to like little tiny gear with little tiny birds that break their feathers, that need a high quality diet and need to be flown daily, you're probably going to be okay. If you're the type of person who sort of adapts well to detail oriented work and you have a regular schedule that you can keep, those things all stack the cards in your favor. This is actually something that so for about 3 years out of college, I worked for Brian Millsap in Florida at the Florida Game and Fish Commission. And we actually partnered on a little paper that compared mortality rates in falconry of kestrels and red-tailed hawks. And we did this, because we had access to the data from several states, game commissions who were able to share the data with us on their disposition forms. But also because in Florida at that time, they were considering whether they were going to outlaw kestrels for apprentices, which they have done and I think in that case it owes as much to trying to, as a conservation measure for the local kestrel that they have there, which is a species of special concern, I think, in Florida. But to my point about the paper, we looked at the numbers and we had maybe a couple hundred birds of each species to look at to compare. Brian did all the statistics for us. To the extent that the data set was good, which is not tremendous. We would love to have had it 10 times as many. But what we found was that about 3% of red-tailed hawks, passage red-tailed hawks, died on a given year, and about 7% of kestrels in captivity died. So more, yes, twice as many, yes. But compare 3% and 7% to the same figures of the wild birds, which we know to be, 50% to 60%, 70%. The question was not, are kestrels slightly more likely to be lost or killed in captivity than red tails, but look at both of them are under 10%. basically the whole management scheme of falconry is so beneficial to any individual bird that you've basically overwhelmed, the statistical probability that your kestrel is more likely than your red tail to be hurt. That said, that's again really just looking at sort of management and these gross figures that are sort of equivocal or hard to tease out. As one thing I can tell you that's different from then, which was in the 90s to now, is that there are a whole lot more Cooper's hawks in the world than there were back then. Like this is something I firmly believe. I think the numbers actually indicate it also. Ton more Cooper's hawks. Cooper's hawks are more urbanized. Kestrel's way more likely to be killed by Cooper's hawk than any red tail ever will be. And so this is so maybe those numbers now, if you were to look at it somehow and decide over the course of a season, over the course of 2 seasons, 3 seasons, are you more likely to have your bird predated by another bird if it's a red tail versus a kestrel? I would say it's absolutely you're better off with a red tail. So it just depends on the area of concern that you're talking about. I think to say across the board that apprentices cannot handle kestrels is demonstrably not true. Plenty of apprentices have done very well with kestrels, given that, I probably still, if I had an apprentice that had access to red tails and a bunch of gray squirrels, probably would feel more comfortable, just because I don't know them very well, and maybe they're not the person that I thought they were. Maybe they stay at work 3 nights in a row and bird doesn't get fed, and maybe I didn't know that, or maybe they didn't indicate that in some way. I don't know. I would much rather them just prove themselves over the course of a season with a red tail that they might not kill in some easily avoidable way, if that makes any sense.
I want to clarify your answer. What I'm hearing you say is that the red tail for an apprentice may offer more room for error with clumsiness because we're learning than a kestrel who may be more susceptible to minor changes in weight, like comparatively because they're just smaller.
It's not that exactly. It's a little bit nuanced. Kestrels actually drop weight at about the same rate, not grams per hour lost, but percentage of body weight.
Right.
The kestrels and red tails are actually very similar to this. Okay. It's funny. It shouldn't have to be that way. It wouldn't be that way if it was, Merlins and peregrines, or Merlins and red tails, or whatever your other comparison would be. But kestrels and red tails actually are both pretty reliable birds in terms of head hunting weight. They're just not impossible to manage. And so on the weight management, that's not the thing that scares me. You do the 22-hour weight management with a kestrel, you're going to be fine. I've seen it just dozens and dozens and dozens of times for years and years and years. You do 22-hour weight management, you're going to be fine. Either way, red tail or kestrel. It's the other things that will really screw you up. It's such a small bird that, if you take your eye off it for a second, a cat's got it. You know what I mean? Like it's weird stuff that makes the difference, where, it's just a red tail hawk's a big, robust system. It's a big honking, rooster sized bird, and just fewer things can happen to it. But weight management, kestrel's about as good an analog of a red tail as there is.
Do you believe weight management? I'm sorry.
I was just going to clarify that I understand the grace period of like weight for health is more or less identical on both birds. It's the other factors surrounding them that may impact the outcome of their health and longevity.
Yeah, I mean, in neither case would I like. There could be a case where you had a big fat red tail that you didn't need to feed for 3 days. Frankly,
right.
That's easily imaginable. I've had that bird. A lot of people I know have had that bird. Few, if any, kestrels you wouldn't want to feed for 3 days. Okay, so on the front end, but again, this is about adjusting for scale. So what I would say is 3 days, whatever that is, if you compress the time scale to a kestrel, it would be about the same. It just happens, I don't know how to do the math on that, but
I'm going to lead you some way with this question. I mean, do you believe weight management is an easy thing for an apprentice to learn?
I am doing everything in my power to make it easy.
Okay. Let me step back. First of all, great presentation, excellent tools. You made something difficult look easy, which is always my definition of a professional, like Eddie Van Halen playing guitar or something like that. But I think, and I agree with much what you're saying. I think if I was the regulatory agency making this decision, I think their mindset is, and this is kind of what Brittany was saying, is I think they believe, right or wrong, that weight management is a complex thing and is one of the more difficult things for apprentices to learn. So they're going on the side of caution where, look, if I forget to feed my red tail for a day, it's probably going to be okay. If I forget to feed my kestrel for a day, it may not be as okay. Again, I don't necessarily agree with this mindset. I just think that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. And if that were the only consideration, if there was nothing else involved in the consideration except the fact that I might forget to feed my bird on a day, then yeah, you're better off with a red tail, and anybody's apprentice is better off with a red tail. I would say that, you know, given the fact that we should adjust our behavior based on the kind of bird that we have, regardless of who we are, how many years we've been in the sport, or what species it is, you ought to adjust your practice to fit the nature of the bird that you've got. It stands to reason that this is a consideration that you would make in this case also. The weight management itself is not any more complex. So I would say it's about defining the nature of the problem. And in this case, the weight management is actually not literally the problem. It's forgetfulness. It's not having a good schedule as a human being. It's like it's different problems. Maybe we discover that problem because it impacted the weight, but it wasn't the weight that was the problem. So yeah.
What I would like to see them do is take some type of action to better instruct people about weight management. I know they're going to say we're going to turn that on to the sponsor, and the sponsor is responsible for doing that. But I'd rather see them provide tools like you are here to help, you know, people learn better than saying, look, we're going to take the least common denominator and we're going to give an apprentice probably the easiest bird for them to raise and the least likely that they're going to have some detrimental result from it.
I understand that. I agree. That's probably the thinking. All the states, everybody on this call, if you know your state regulator and you want them to have a weight management card, I'll send you one. So if you will give it to your state regulator and say, hey, look, this is a guy, this is a falconer we know. You know, this is his system. He's trying to simplify it for everybody. If you want to give it, I will send you one. So is this the best thing since sliced bread for making it easy? I don't know, but if I could think of a better one, I would do it. And the reason why I'm doing it is so that we can, you know, just chunk by chunk demystify this process and take those variables out of I don't know what it is we're taking it out of, but what we're going to have left at the end of all that is really just time in the field hunting. It's really just, you know, more fun and more success with healthier birds is sort of my goal.
Matt, would you say that, just to wrap up everything we just discussed here, that, you know, your system, which obviously simplifies what can be a complicated thing, but it does kind of, it assumes basic competence with the husbandry, because that's where the pitfall to it could kind of be. If you just aren't being on top of the basic husbandry, which I guess is the concern with an apprentice that they may not be, that's what could cause it to all fall apart.
Well, I've known experienced falconers that were not as competent as I would like anybody to be, as anybody would like anybody to be. So that's a problem that you're going to find across the board. It's not, you know, I would say most apprentices, that would be the 1 year or the 2 years where they're probably the most, you know, they're freaking out all the time about the bird. And generally speaking, you know, if you're freaking out about your bird, you're watching it all the time, and watching it's a good thing. So, you know, it's later on when we start taking things for granted and we get lazy, that sometimes the problems come up. But that being said, character counts, being serious about falconry counts, having a schedule that's amenable to falconry counts. Those things, being the kind of person who doesn't forget, that they've trapped a hawk and that it needs to eat, that counts. And that's why falconry is hard. That's why that's why this is not a group of, 500,000 people. It's never going to be that. It's always going to be a hard thing to do. It's always going to challenge us. It's always going to take the best, of everything we got to bring to it. And that shouldn't scare us. And there is no way to make it totally easy. So at the end of the day, there's no way to take all the danger out of it, to take all the challenge out of it. But, we're all obviously people who want to accept that in order to get the rewards out of it. So Chris asks, if you ever crop up during the hunting season to maintain your birds at target weight? I'm not going to say I never crop a bird up. If I am at the end of a field meet and the bird's weight is kind of crept up because we're hunting all day and the wind is high and it's cold and we're catching game and the bird knows it's in a hunting, it's in a hunting, the birds know they're at field meets. Okay, this is something that you'll figure out if you don't know already, is that they know when things are different and they know that you're going to hunt all day. They get excited about it. My experience is that, by Sunday night, and you're flying them 2 or 3 times a day for 3 or 4 days in a row, you're actually higher in weight than you would have been if you were at home. And then you got to drive home. I'm going to feed them a little bit more on that last kill probably than I would at home on a normal hunt. So do I ever crop up during the hunting season? Yes, probably. Do I recommend it as a normal thing? No. Is it an exceptional situation when it happens? For me, it is. And usually at home, it's whatever they need for, it's their fed weight. That's what they get. Okay. 0.5 gram per kestrel, 1 gram for merlin. How about grams for red-tailed hawk? So it's going to be about, it's going to be different where you live. It's going to be different the size of the red tail you have. Maybe 3 grams. Justin, what's yours burn an hour where you are during the hunting season? In other words, we can figure this out. How many grams a day of food did you feed it?
So you're talking to me right now?
I'm talking to you right now
about grams. The problem is that I'm an ounce guy and I'm converting to grams this season.
23.8 or 28.3. What is it? It's 20.
Yeah, it's let's just say my bird last season, when he was catching in NAFA, he was flying at 26.5 ounces, which is roughly 750 grams.
Okay. And so, I guess the question is, what was the fed weight? The fed weight might have been, 800 grams or 810 grams. So maybe 50 or 60 grams. Let's say it's 60 grams divided by 22 is 2.7 grams an hour. So between 2.5 and 3 grams an hour. It's been a long time since I've flown a red tail, but a red tail seems like a 3 gram an hour bird. Goshawk at the same weight might be a 4 gram an hour or a 3.5 gram an hour bird. Hard to I just don't know anything about goshawks. So, but yeah, I think there's a number. I wouldn't want to use that number as some kind of magic, wand. But I bet you if you looked at 100 red tails that caught, 60 head a game every season, you would find out that red tails are within, 2.5 to 3.5 grams an hour at hunting weight. That's what I'm guessing, but that's what I think.
Just being respectful of your time, I did want to let you know it's 9:52.
I'm about bushed now. So look, I just can't say how grateful I am that everybody showed up and stayed. And really thank you for your interest, and look forward to seeing you at your field meets and next NAFA meet, what have you. Please call me anytime. Let me
Thank you, by the way.
Let's see.
Really, thank you very much. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's actually not sending this to me. I'm trying to put my phone number in there. Anyway, find me on Facebook. Anytime you want to connect with me about anything, please do. All right, y'all have a good night, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah,
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Take
Such
care.
good stuff.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Steve Hines says hello. He's my boss.
Oh, good. Tell Steve I said hi. He should be watching.
Yeah, no.
Good job, my man. Good night. See you later.
Thank you. Hey, Eric. Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. Y'all take care.